if I'm in a group, especially if it's somewhere that I don't know that well, I probably would stop on a single track lane if I didn't think there was enough space for someone to overtake. If it had been kind of a while, but then I go riding with friends who wouldn't dream of stopping ever, because it's very much like up you, no, this is my road kind of thing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Back, a Cycling Weekly podcast. I'm Anna Maria Rook, I'm the North American editor, and today I'm joined by Adam and James. James, you're new to this podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's James Shrubsall. I'm a senior news and features writer on Cycling Weekly and Cycling Weekly magazine. And, I've been there for forever. And, I've been cycling even longer than that, so... since my teens, I've done a bit of racing, done a bit of Audax, touring, you name it. I've done it all over the years. These days it's mainly kind of pootling around on gravel locally, but I'll get a few longer rides in when I can.
What cycling area do you find most interesting?
Well, for the last sort of couple of years, been really sort of having a look at the gravel scene, which I think is quite cool, especially the sort of longer distance ultra riding stuff. Maybe one day I'll actually get to try some of it myself, but I haven't yet.
Great. Let's start off with some high-level news. Adam, you want to tell us what's happening in bike racing?
We're still very much in the early season. Things are not sleepy, but things are just still waking up. We had the women's version of Valenciana at the weekend, where Demi Vollering won 2 of the 4 stages and won the overall. One of the stages was cancelled by wind, and wind was kind of the theme of the weekend because it cancelled a stage of the Vuelta a Murcia as well. The men's UAE Tour kicked off yesterday, and I think Del Toro won the first stage, which was UAE Team Emirates XRG's 11th win of the season so far. They are going for 100, and they've already won 11, and it's not even March yet, so it's going pretty well for them. Let's not get into right now what that says about the state of cycling finances, but there's a little bit of imbalance there. And then today, Remco Evenepoel won the Stage 2 time trial, which is his 6th win of the season. James, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, if you count his GC win in the Volta Valenciana, that's the 7th.
7th. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
7th. Yeah. I mean,
that's
that's pretty impressive. Elsewhere, that's about it for this week. I'm pretty sure, unless I'm forgetting something, which I'm sure I have. But UAE Tour continues this week, but it's only a week and a half until Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. So everything really gets started then. I'm this sounds very boring and old-fashioned of me, but I'm not sure I've ever really cared that much about racing until Omloop happens.
It is considered the season kickoff still, isn't it? Even though we've been racing for 2 months now.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they keep adding races before it, and they all matter. Every race matters, but there's just something about hitting the cobbles for the first time that really makes it feel like cycling is actually here.
Yeah, I suppose like the classics are it's the big first section of the season, really, isn't it? That fans and riders, I suppose, can really get their teeth into.
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed. There was some other news about a former rider that hit the newsstands, so to speak, and that was Lance Armstrong. Adam?
Yeah, there's going to be a Lance Armstrong biopic. Biopic. I've never really understood how to say that, and I'm not going to start now. But the news that everyone wanted is that there's going to be another Lance Armstrong film. There already was one 10 years ago, plus 1 billion documentaries. But this film's got the rights to his life, and he's on board with it. So perhaps take the critical view of Armstrong with a pinch of salt. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because it's got a lot of big Hollywood big hitters behind it, and it is a good story. Let's forget about whether it's good for cycling or not. It's a good story.
It would be interesting to see how this film differs from the ones that have come before. You know, what with it having kind of Armstrong's blessing, I suppose. I mean, I
it gets
Brunel saying that, you know, this is our chance to tell our story, which might be a little bit ominous, but well, we'll see.
Well, it gets the full Hollywood treatment, and so if that's the storytelling we can expect, my question is, how will he present it? Will he be the anti-hero? Will he just be a hero? Like, what sentiment are we going to walk away with at the end of this film?
It's impossible to say. I mean, I think he is. He can't be not a villain, but I think there is, you know, I think, and there's not even, the thing is, there's not even really a redemptive arc. You know, it's not like he's gone on to be a better person. He's, you know, he apologized that one time on Oprah, but since then he hasn't, you know, he's apologized for cheating. He hasn't apologized for being a bully or for kind of, you know, tarnishing the sport or for ruining people's lives, beyond the kind of the pure facts of him cheating. But then again, he was the last great American cycling hero, but, you know, so it clearly still matters.
Yeah, my question is, has he tarnished the sport more than he benefited it? So in the US, so many people took up bike riding and bike racing because of him. It put biking and cycling back into the mainstream. And when you take a big picture, I wonder which one outweighs the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the impact he had in the States was absolutely huge. Lots of people on bikes. Whether he has tarnished it individually himself more than he's benefited it, that's very arguable. I mean, like, you consider how cycling was basically imploding anyway in those kind of early 2000s, and you know, somehow Armstrong managed to keep his nose clean, or at least out of the headlines, for a long time. And I think, you know, cycling had already pretty much tarnished itself by that point.
I did, however, I mean, I don't disagree, but I do think that he had, you know, I think Armstrong alone has had a bigger negative impact on cycling worldwide than anyone else. And, you know, there's all the kind of whataboutery in that he wasn't the only person, everyone did it, he was clearly a good cyclist, but he was so much more famous than anyone else. You know, like, I'm afraid I'm too young to properly remember, but I'm pretty sure that people weren't walking around in 2005 knowing who Jan Ullrich was. But everyone did know who Lance Armstrong was because, you know, he was friends with George W. Bush. He dated a celebrity. He was like on the cover of magazines and on talk shows like, I don't know, Letterman or Oprah or whatever. And he was bigger than the sport in a way that no cyclist really has been since. Like, not even Tadej Pogačar is known outside of cycling. And you know, if I go to the pub and ask my friends who aren't into cycling, who do you know who is a cyclist, Lance Armstrong will be in the top 3 people, and that's still 100%. The case. And so the fact that the only cyclist they can name is also one of the biggest cheats of all time is pretty bad for our sport. So that's how I feel about Armstrong anyway. But let's not go on too long about him.
Just out of interest, who do you think would be in the others in the top 3?
Oh, I think in Britain, I think Chris Hoy and Bradley Wiggins. That's the most people you're getting. Maybe Mark Cavendish and maybe Victoria Pendleton.
Yeah.
In Europe, obviously it's different because cycling is a bigger cultural thing there. In America, I wouldn't even. I guess if you're a little bit older, you probably know who Greg LeMond is.
Even if you're younger, I'd say Greg LeMond is definitely up there because, you know, he's got bikes, like a bike company. He's still quite relevant. He also has a ton of movies about him. So yeah, I would say people know Greg LeMond. I would also throw Peter Sagan in there. He had a bit of a bad boy following, and if you've ever been to Tour California and see that just troves of fans waiting to get a glimpse of him, I would say he's out there. But I do think that's definitely more of a cycling audience at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I just have done that so many times. You know, you say to someone, I write about cycling, and they say, Lance Armstrong? You're like, yes, Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah. And this is why there will be a movie, because everyone knows the name.
Exactly.
All right, James, what's going on with today's riders?
Today's riders, well, Jonas Vingegaard, or Vingegaard if you prefer to say it that way, which I believe is the correct way. Anyway, he's been in the headlines because he's lost his coach, Tim Heemskerk. Things aren't going great for Jonas, to be fair. They say sort of bad luck comes in threes. Well, it seems to have come in a four for the Vingegaard, because he's, first of all, he lost Simon Yates, who was a fantastic mountain domestique for him, sort of in the Tour de France. Then he crashed trying to drop a fan who was tailing him, and then he fell ill. So his season is not going brilliantly as it stands. But, thankfully, what's the 17th of February as we're recording this, there's still a very long way to go till the Tour, till the big appointments. So, I think he can probably turn this around. How much of an impact losing his coach is going to have, I don't know. Apparently the team is going to pass him on to another coach within Visma, Lisa Bike, who I'm sure knows the ropes. Tim Heemskerk himself, he said he retired because he wasn't really able to follow his passion and creativity as much as he wanted to, which you can understand creativity within a setup like, right at the top of the World Tour. There's not a lot of room for it. You kind of have to go with science, I'd imagine. I'm not sure what he wants to do from here, but it feels like things can probably only go on the up for Jonas right now.
You said it now.
He's doing the Giro d'Italia before he gets to the Tour, James. So that's the bigger point. That's the first big appointment.
Rather closer.
It's interesting. Visma, obviously, one of the best men's and women's team in the world. They won the Giro d'Italia, the Vuelta a España for men last year, and the Tour de France Femme avec Swift for women through Pauline Ferrand-Perot last year. And yet there's just something feels a bit off about them this season. They'll probably be fine, but Jonas's problems. They're looking for a new sponsor now. Simon Yates retired. Tim Heemskerk retired. Wout van Aert got injured as well. Obviously, everything's things could do with getting a bit better there. Basically, if they win the Giro, everything will be back to normal. But or if Wout van Aert wins a monument. But it's interesting. I think their performance in recent seasons has kind of hid the fact that they're not as well funded as some of their rivals. If you just look at the men's squad, especially now Simon Yates has gone, you think, okay, well, there's Vingegaard and there's Jorgensen, and then there's quite a few young prospects, but there's no one else there right now. And you look at a team like Red Bull or UAE, and they've got all Little Trek, and they've got a billion GC riders, all good now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, you have to wonder with Visma as whether they've it looks from the outside like they seem to have hit a plateau. I remember when they kind of burst onto the scene, I think 2019, when they took the yellow jersey at the start of the Tour de France in Brussels there with Mike Turnison. And from there, they won the team time trial, I think, there. And, they just carried on going. And it feels like it's just starting to peter out a little bit. And there's been some bad luck too, which we know is always kind of waiting around the corner for everyone in cycling. And they haven't been particularly lucky.
It definitely points to the importance of having multiple GC riders. Because right now there's so much pressure on this one rider. And they don't have anyone else waiting in the gate, so to speak. So that is an immense amount of pressure for any GC rider.
When it comes to the Giro, that is quite a mouth-watering prospect, really, for Vingegaard to be there. It feels like he's got to go in as the favourite, despite all the issues he's had at this point. If he can sort of pull off the win there, maybe there you go. Visma Lease a Bike's season is kind of made right there and then. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in May.
Moving on, our first segment of today is the biggest stories on the web this past week. These are the most read stories that our readers found interesting. This was led by, I admitted, a kind of a clickbaity headline that I put on this story about a bill that got passed, or proposed rather, in Iowa. In Iowa, lawmakers introduced a road safety bill, and I use air quotes because it is basically a safety bill that will have serious impact if it were to get passed. And that is that bikes are no longer, in this proposal, and e-mobility devices are no longer allowed on any roads with a speed limit above 25 miles per hour. This means that bikes will be prohibited on the majority of roads in Iowa. And additionally, it says that all bikes must have the ability to skid. And then finally, it is pretty anti-courier as well, as it states that a person must keep their hands on the handlebars at all times, and they shall not carry a package, a bundle, or an article that prevents them from doing so. So it's all in all a very anti-bike bill, to the point where the executive director of Iowa Bicycle called it the most anti-biking bill in the history of the Iowa legislature. So it is, it's pretty wild, and luckily it got stalled for now because the committee leader said it needed more polishing, and I would certainly agree with that. If it were to pass as is, it would also put events like RACBRAI, which is the biggest cycling event in Iowa and probably one of the biggest in the nation, it would put a pause on that because that's mostly held on farm roads. It goes from one end of Iowa to the other end, and those are all roads that are at least 40 miles per hour or higher. So I guess my question is, what is y'all's reaction to this proposal, and where do you ride? Surely you ride on roads with speed limits higher than 25 miles per hour.
But I guess my first question, Rook, is what do you think motivates? Like, where's this bill come from? Like, is it just kind of classic, like, it's a classic distraction, bash cyclists? You know, it's easy. It's an easy vote winner for the Conservatives. Is it that?
I don't know, because it's disguised as a safety bill, but it effectively just bans biking on most of Iowa's roads. So, there is. I feel like it's an easy way to say, look, we did something to our roads. We now are prohibiting mixed use on roads rather than building bike infrastructure. This is their solution, saying we keep cars and bikes separate by just not allowing bikes, which is a very cheap and rather alarming way to separate road use. And
is the kind of aim to actually allow or enable bikes to kind of be separate from cars by building, for example, cycle lanes alongside roads? Segregated ones, for example. Yeah,
interestingly, those were not mentioned. It effectively just bans bikes. It doesn't say we will build infrastructure to allow safe passage on bicycles. It just says no more bikes on these roads. And I do, I ride a lot of farm roads, and there can be some interesting interactions with different road users because, there'll be blind corners or people aren't expecting other road users on those low-trafficked roads, but this is not the answer at all.
I think there are sadly plenty of people in the UK that would probably like to see a bill like this passed here too, but I think the government are progressive enough not to do that and to know that it's sort of not gonna but ultimately it's not the way forward. Because, as you say, most of our roads here are well above 25 miles an hour speed limit. So, it's essentially outlaw cycling. It seems crazy. It seems rather disingenuous to call it a safety bill, put it that way. Maybe they really do think that's what it is. But it's certainly anti-biking bill. Feels a lot more appropriate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say... a lot of roads. I was going to say most. Who knows? A lot of roads in Britain away from main roads are single track. Kind of that's probably what you're referring to when you say farm roads. We'd call them lanes, and I mean the vibe is always kind of you never know what's around the next corner, but I think in the main part everyone coexists well enough. I think I mean obviously you could rile up any kind of motorist should you wish to, but in the main it's I don't find I'm kind of having that many negative interactions. But no, James is right. I mean, I think that there would be a lot of people in this country that would love that. But I have to say, like every kind of couple of years, a government spokesperson of whatever kind of colour or type, but this was particularly under the Conservative government, they love to kind of say something, even if nothing really changed, but love to kind of like bash cyclists a bit because it's just an easy kind of thing to throw to the right wing press to say like, yeah, no, we're on the side of drivers, whatever that means. Because obviously, I think we all know that we live in a world where everyone should be encouraged and allowed to kind of transition beyond the combustion engine and the car, but it's easier to say, oh no, bikes are ruining everything, let's build more roads kind of thing.
It's just wild that cycling is a partisan issue. It really shouldn't be, getting people opportunities to move around in different ways should be a universal issue, not a bipartisan one.
Absolutely. And I always think it should be sold on kind of a public health ground. I mean, not only are you getting people out of cars, but you're making everyone just fitter and happier. And that's kind of missed in the kind of, I want to drive my SUV down this road as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Maybe try getting out of it and you'll have a happier life. That's my message.
I will say, granted that our audience is biased and likes their bikes, this article was read widely and commented on widely with a lot of outrage and alarm that such a bill was even proposed. And I'm glad to see that it got paused for now, and I doubt anything quite this severe will get passed in the near future or ever, hopefully.
Although this hasn't been the only bill of its type, I guess, has it, Brooke, in the States?
No. Earlier this year, a e-bike specific law got passed in New Jersey, which it wasn't just a proposal; it actually got passed, which treats electric mobility devices, so not just e-bikes but also scooters and everything else, like a car, a vehicle. So you have to get insurance, an e-bike driver's license, which doesn't even exist, and what I say, insurance, license, and registration. So it's treated exactly like a vehicle here in the United States, which is a massive hurdle for encouraging people to get on bikes and get out of their cars, because that is very costly. And a lot of people opt to ride an e-bike instead of a car. So then having to get insurance and registration and everything, treating bikes like cars is just rather outrageous. It's a bad idea, and it effectively prevents people from getting on e-bikes.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you haven't actually made licenses and insurance for e-bikes available at the time of passing the bill, then it essentially is a ban, isn't it? It seems crazy.
Yeah, and I don't know where that is coming from, other than ulterior motive to get people to stay in their cars and keep driving and buying oil or gas. Petrol, as you guys say.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on?
Yeah, talking of American politics, one of the other big stories of last week was a story where our tech editor Andy spoke to the head of product at Standard Bikes in Germany, Max Faschina, I think his name is, and Andy picked up on a couple of the things that Max said, especially with regard to kind of the impact that US domestic and foreign policy is having on the bike business. None of it's, particularly a massive surprise, but kind of relating it to bikes is kind of a bit novel. So obviously the tariffs and the turmoil that the tariffs have brought to the global business market, especially with something like bikes, when there's such a big supply chain and parts come from all over, and the steel comes from places and different things, and there has been a kind of this theory for a while that American brands will suffer because of tariffs, and while they might be able to boost themselves at home eventually in the US, they're going to struggle selling their goods in big markets like China. And so that was one strand of the piece. Another is that the scenes that we see in the US at the moment with regard to kind of ICE in Minnesota and other, let's say, controversial domestic policies have kind of will cause people to stop using American brands. There was even the suggestion that kind of SRAM might not be favored by people in Europe anymore because it's American, which might seem extreme, but I guess if you're someone who really cares about politics and you have a choice between Shimano or SRAM, and you're kind of anti-American, then maybe you choose the not SRAM option. I mean, you only have to look at kind of the greeting that JD Vance got at the Winter Olympics when he was booed, and just kind of the general vibe at the moment. I mean, obviously the other thing is the Greenland stuff. So that the USA isn't particularly popular in Europe right now, and that might well lead to kind of people being turned off from an American brands, which is why I should say some American brands have kind of come out either against tariffs or against Trump's foreign policy or against domestic policy. But the ones that haven't, maybe they will suffer. I don't know.
It is this whole time it's forcing people to bring politics into something like into their consumer choices. And it was interesting seeing these brands like the QBP brands, so Salsa and Surly and some of the other Minnesota brands come forward and make a statement, which in doing so gives them some goodwill with people that are aligned in their view. But it also makes it suddenly a divisive purchase, right? Now that if you're supporting Salsa, say, you're in a way making a statement with your dollars. And that's always the case to a certain extent, that consumers should make educated purchases. But it's heightened the sense of bringing political views into your purchase.
Yeah, I just think we just haven't seen the end of kind of what the current US administration is doing at home and with their foreign policy has kind of on the rest of the world. Like this week I read a story that in the UK, the main banks are going to basically form a system to rival MasterCard and Visa, because banks here have realized that there might be a time when we can't use Visa or MasterCard, which are both American companies, because of anything. And so there's all this kind of sudden realization that the US isn't exactly aligned with our values as we always thought it would be. And that is coming to the cycling world, basically.
Absolutely.
I think I mean, whichever side you fall on, one thing that no one can really deny about American politics right now is it's just not predictable at all. And I think for anyone looking to invest in a US company, whether it's sort of suppliers, distributors, or even customers, you want, especially after, we're basically still dragging ourselves out of the mire of what happened with COVID. What's needed right now for the bike industry is predictability. And I think there's very little predictability when it comes to kind of stuff that's happening in the US. I mean, you don't know if you're going to get a tariff next week, etc. So, there's there's a kind of pragmatic reason, I think, for a lot of industry players to look elsewhere, which you can understand.
Yeah. What were the comments on this? Do you know, Adam? What was the reader's opinion?
Oh, there was all sorts. There were people that agreed, and there were people that kind of thought that, as ever, that we shouldn't be kind of bringing politics into cycling. I don't have any evidence for this, so take what I'm about to say with a pinch of salt. But I think the people that comment on our website tend to be American men especially, and they obviously might have a different point of view to someone speaking from Germany, as Max Machina was, on kind of what people in Europe might do with American brands. But yeah, it's interesting that there does seem to be a bit of a general cooling of European opinion towards America, which was always mixed. You know, I'm not saying that before it was massive, like 10 out of 10 positive, but it's a lot more confused now, that's for sure.
Indeed. Interesting. All right, so we move on to some numbers, James.
Yeah, so this is the story of Tadej Pogačar, accidentally, or maybe not, we don't know, leaking his secret power numbers onto Strava. It was really interesting because Pogačar and really most pro cyclists, they don't tend to do this. Their power figures tend to be a well-kept industry secret, really. So it was surprised to see this. It's not the first time we've heard him talking about his power numbers. He's talked about it before on a podcast where he sort of wowed everybody by saying that he would stick to zone 2, which for him apparently is 320 to 340 watts. He would ride that for 5 hours, which everyone was obviously up in arms about. But now we have his actual figures. It was actually the most recent ride he put on Strava, and the big sort of headline info that came out of that was the fact that he complained about a fan interaction. This person had been rude, wanted a selfie with him, and ended up kind of swearing at him and just walking away. So I don't know, maybe Tadej Pogačar was a little bit sort of wrapped up in all of that and accidentally forgot to take his power figures off. I don't know, but I've checked today and they're still up there. So no doubt he's aware of it and he's just decided to leave them on. So that's quite interesting.
What are these numbers?
I'm sure.
I was going to say, once Cycling Weekly have written about it, of course he knows about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so here we go. The way we've got these figures is essentially from his power meter, the way it's configured into his zones. So starting with zone 1 is anything up to 237 watts.
Which is probably 90% of people's like FTP.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about cyclists, just anyone. Yeah, that's zone
right
3.
Now, that is above my FTP, I would say. So, not that that's a particular boast still. But so his zone 2 has got it down here as 238 to 323. So it's kind of slightly lower than the figures he was talking about in the podcast, I suppose, which he said were 320 to 340. But, it's the off-season. Perhaps he's just holding back a few watts.
Also, it's just one ride. Like, who says he was going all out? We don't know what he was doing on this ride. What his training regimen required him to do on that ride.
Well, it looks like he spent most of his time in zone 3, which is 324 to 387 watts. He spent 50% of the ride in zone 3. And then sort of small amounts of time in zone 4, which is practically equates to threshold, is 388 to 452. And zone 5, 455 to 516, and it goes on. And probably don't need up to zone 7, but if you do, it's 646 plus. So it's interesting to see, and it is interesting that he's still not taking them down. So maybe he wants to just get them out there and show everybody how good he is. I don't know, but
maybe it's a deliberate bluff. Maybe
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not really sure how on earth you'd use this information in a practical sense, because like in a race, you're just trying to crack someone, and then because it's Tadej Pogačar, he won't crack, and then he rides like it's you can't like look at your power meter and be like, well, I'm riding in Tadej zone 4 for too long now, so he must be cooked. But maybe it's just a bit of fun he's having with us. Yeah.
It could be, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't put it past him, really, would you? It's that he is that sort of rider. Although the reason that riders do tend to keep it secret is because, in theory, team scientists can work out how much wattage another rider's putting out. So if they know that, for example, on Alpe d'Huez, the rider is putting out higher than their FTP, then they know they're not necessarily going to be able to keep that up till the top, and therefore, you know that they're going to be suffering quite soon. So it gives you sort of some insider info that can come in useful in the big tours.
Were you impressed by these numbers, or were you like, I expected them to be higher?
I mean, they're obviously really good numbers. But what I keep coming back to is, and we mentioned this earlier before the podcast while we were just chatting, is and my brother Steve, his FTP at one point was 400 watts, which is just bonkers. And so I was kind of expecting Tadej Pogačar, world-beating Tour de France champion, to maybe be closer to 500 for his Zone 4. But I imagine he's probably about 30 kilos lighter than.
I was about to ask exactly that question.
Yeah.
It's all very subjective, isn't it? But I mean, I think the biggest thing for me was when he revealed his Zone 2 as being 320 to 340, which most of us could probably only dream of for our FTP. So there's a reason that he's the best in the world.
Shall we move on to our controversial topics of the week? Not really. They're just the reader debate, the emails that we received, or stories that got the most debate. This week, Adam, this is one of yours. It's about Jim Ratcliffe. As a person who doesn't live in the UK, please enlighten me.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think, is the 7th richest man in Britain, which is ironic because he doesn't actually live in Britain. He lives in Monaco because he's a tax exile. He owns Ineos Grenadiers, the cycling team, which is why this is relevant to us. It's not, we haven't just chosen a random man. But he does, he also owns the Ineos Petrochemical Group. That's where his millions come from, his billions. And he also owns Manchester United, the football club. Well, doesn't own, he co-owns, part-owns Manchester United, the football club. And he already is a controversial figure. He was a big advocate for Brexit 10 years ago. He supports fracking. I mean, he owns a petrochemical company and has produced a 4x4 car as well. So he's I wouldn't want to say he's anti-green, but he's definitely not pro-green. And but last week he kind of took the controversy a step further when in a unprompted, this isn't it, he decided to say these things. It wasn't kind of teased out of him or revealed or anything. He said in a TV interview that I think the quote is, the UK is being colonized by immigrants. He then kind of got his facts wrong, whether deliberately or accidentally, you can't say, but he said that the population in the UK had gone up 12 million in the last 6 years, which is untrue, false. It hasn't. It's obviously not obviously. It is growing, but at a much, much slower rate. But it is kind of a very anti-immigration comment, like very strong. And in the UK, it kind of it dominated the news for a day because he's a big deal. Both because he's seventh richest man, but also because he owns a big football club, which wouldn't exist without immigration. I'm not just talking about the players, but everything at that football club. And the football club actually released a statement not saying specifically about its owners' views, but it did release a statement saying, Manchester United stands for everyone. We're an open club. We're proud of our heritage, kind of thing. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, criticised his comments, and in the end, he kind of gave a half apology. He said, "I'm really sorry if anyone was offended by what I said," basically, which is very much not retracting what he said. And I asked the cycling team if they wished to comment, and they didn't, which I think speaks volumes. Either they think it's not worth their time saying anything, but or I don't know. But I think it's pretty outrageous that they don't feel they're able to distance themselves from it. Again, it's cycling is quite a white sport, a European-centric sport, but there was all this noise about Ratcliffe's comments from kind of pressure groups in football and ex-players and the team, and in cycling, just silence. And that's why I think the story is so big. But to bring it round to why we're talking about it, it also caused a lot of kind of comments and debate amongst readers, but also people on social media, and it was kind of a big thing for that as well. I mean, a lot of people saying, "Why are you writing this?"
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to ask: was that the overall takeaway again? That once again we tipped into politics that really upsets our readers.
I mean, it's definitely a theme, but I think it's pretty clear why we wrote it, because cycling team owner says inflammatory thing is always news, whoever that was and whatever that thing was. Yeah, it kind of caused all kinds of outcry. I think the most interesting comment I saw on it was from Ned Boulting, the cycling pundit, who's quite a big deal here in the UK, who basically and I'm not going to use the word because I don't think we can swear on this podcast, but called basically said that he's always thought Jim Ratcliffe was an idiot, and this has confirmed it. And so some people did say things, but the most notable thing is how silent the cycling world has been. The UCI didn't want to comment. Ineos Grenadiers didn't want to comment. There isn't really a comparable anti-racism group within cycling to the ones that spoke out about it in football. It's but we still think it's a big deal. It's in the magazine this week. It's not going. We're not going to stop talking about it. That's for sure.
Great. James, you wrote a couple pieces that got a fair bit of engagement. You want to enlighten us?
Yeah, well, the piece I wrote was kind of, I suppose, an opinion piece, if you like. Just talking about my own cycling and talking about sort of dealing with traffic that's kind of starting to build up behind, and just kind of saying that what I found worked really well for me was just pausing by the side of the road and letting it go by, which and lots of our readers kind of responded to this, and actually almost everybody was in complete agreement with the article and with each other, which I didn't necessarily expect. I was imagining a bit of pushback, actually, because as cyclists we do tend to be pretty territorial. We sort of defend our right to be on the road and to sort of just share the road really with cars very strongly. But no, everybody is apparently a lot more enlightened than me, because they already knew that this is a really good thing to do, whereas it's something that I've probably started to do a lot more in the last several years, especially now that I'm riding gravel a lot more, and my average speed doesn't matter to me so much as when I was sort of training to race or whatever, when I might try and push on and, really didn't want to kind of give up that last sort of 0.2 of a miles an hour or whatever silly thing it was. But now I find, actually, even if it's just one or two cars behind, if it looks like they're not going to be able to get by for, any length of time, then, I just pull over, and quite often I get a wave of thanks, maybe a smile, and it sort of diffuses entirely what can become sort of sometimes quite an inflamed situation, because as I wrote in the piece, that what often happens, or has happened to me in the past, is the sort of, not the car immediately behind, but the one before that, gets agitated with the one in front of them that it's been hesitant and hasn't taken opportunities to pass when it could have done. And then who bears the brunt of that? It's the cyclists, of course. So you get the close pass, or the hand gestures, or the people leaning on the horn. So, it does away with all of that. And yes, it might take 20 seconds of your time, but, that's no big deal, is it?
Do you find that if you start doing that, there are roads where you just end up pulling over all the time because, it's a more well-trafficked road and there's always going to be cars? Are there times where you're just pulling over all the time and ultimately you're going to avoid using that road?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I don't really use bigger roads that are sort of at all heavily trafficked. I just, maybe as I've got older, I just get more and more kind of wary of the traffic, and especially now sort of doing so much of my riding entirely away from traffic. When you get back on a road that's kind of well used with cars and lorries, it feels really uncomfortable. So, I become a sort of my own worst enemy, really. But so I do most of my riding in the lanes when it's on tarmac, and it doesn't happen that often that I need to pull over. Sort of once every half an hour maybe, or 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think. I think I reacted quite vociferously when James pitched this to me last week, because I'm being 20 years younger than James. I'm kind of still in my belligerent, no, that car will wait kind of phase. But I think it does differ. I think I don't think I would ever do it on a 2-lane road, because that car can just wait for a gap. There's always there is space for them to overtake when there's not traffic coming the other way. Like that's. But on a lane, especially if it's a lane that I don't know that well, and I if it's a lane I do know well, I might be thinking in my head, I know there's a passing place in 20 meters time. I don't even have to stop. I can just kind of roll in there and they can overtake me. But if it's somewhere, if I'm in a group, especially if it's somewhere that I don't know that well, I probably would stop on a single track lane. If I didn't think there was enough space for someone to overtake, if it had been kind of a while. But then I go riding with friends who wouldn't dream of stopping ever, because it's very much like, up you, no, this is my road kind of thing. Maybe in 20 years time we'll get to James's wise and enlightened place.
I think it is an age thing, because I'm with James on this one. I'd rather protect myself and move over, let the cars pass, than them making a sketchy maneuver that potentially puts me at risk. And just to make everything more comfortable, I'm more likely to pull over if I realize that I'm backing up some cars. But I will say the roads here are a lot wider, so it doesn't happen all that often. All right, moving on to our final segment, our hero and villain of the week. What do you guys got? Do you have a hero or villain? Adam, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I have a villain, and my villain is more of a concept than a person. But my villain is both Wiltshire County Council, which is a local authority here in the southwest of England, and potholes, because I was out on a bike ride on Saturday, and 75 kilometers into that bike ride, I hit one of the biggest potholes I've ever seen. Don't know how I didn't swerve it, but I didn't, because these things happen. And I went straight into it, broke my wheel. Didn't come off. Somehow didn't come off. I still don't really know, because, I don't think of myself as I'm not Peter Sagan or a great bike handler, but bang, straight into it, and that was it. Day over. I had to walk for 20 minutes to go and sit on a bench in the nearest village. That was the end of my ride. But yeah,
that's a real bummer of a ride.
There are so many things that could go wrong where you can just fix it, whether that's inner tube, chain, basic mechanical. But when it's that ride ending, it's a whole nother level. What about you?
I think my villain's going to be these proposals and laws being passed at the moment that are overwhelmingly anti-bike. I don't like that trend at all. And it gets people away from bikes when I would love to see people use anything but a car more often. Active transportation, public transportation, anything. It makes the roads less trafficky. So people that do drive, it's a win for them and better for the environment and better for us, our mental and physical health. So when I see bills like this being proposed or passed where we're actively preventing people from getting on bikes, that's alarming to me.
The thing I always come back to with this is kind of when the pandemic happened and there were less people around and there were less cars around as a result, and people were cycling more because roads were not traffic free, but quieter, and no one had anything else to do, so they were cycling. Not everyone around the world, people were political leaders were saying cycling is the future. Now's our chance to reshape everything. And then this is definitely something I see in the UK, and I'm sure it's the case in the US. With political changes, it feels like things are going backwards. And you assume it's easy to assume that everything is always kind of progressive and going forwards. And even with cycling, building infrastructure, kind of just promoting the culture of it, and then 5 years down the line, things kind of go backwards instead. And it doesn't seem particularly 2026 that I wished for anyway.
So yeah, we seem to have lost James. So I'm just going to wrap it up here for today. Thank you all for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. If you have any questions, shoot us an email or find us on social media. We'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Bye-bye.